Good evening, everyone. System Chalk here with the 45th episode of Cultist Simulator the Dancer DLC, playing as Margaret Zell. Now, I had a little housekeeping to do. I'm going to save that for the end of the broadcast. I think it's largely good news for folks. But one comment I wanted to make at the start was that my secondary monitor has died, and I will be getting a new one, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get a new one between now and getting this episode out. So the real drawback here is that if something like my microphone cuts out, or if there's some other imperfection in the video, I'm able to detect that at the time when I have a second window, whereas now it's just going to be running in the background. So I apologize in advance if there's any problems. You can feel free to mention them because I don't tend to watch the videos beginning to end. I just don't have the time to do that in preparing them. But I thought I should maybe mention here that I'm not able to keep a watchful eye on any technical problems, and that will actually include the runtime for this video. So I'm going to do my best to try and keep it around the half-hour mark, although I know I've been running a little bit later lately. And I'll do my best. I'll try and keep this as normal as we can. But we've got a couple things. So number one, I think I had made, this is a very, very long time ago, but I'd made some bad assumption. I think it's just because I stopped looking at the Stag Door's riddle after a while, and I'd always kind of assumed that it would be a certain type of lore that I'd needed, not realizing that I had it for a while. But the riddle was, what are the words that make sacrifice sweet? Answer this riddle to pass the Stag Door and be accounted a no. And of course we have the delightful sacrament. So pleasant upon the ear, one could listen over and over. These are the words that make sacrifice sweet. So it's been sitting here waiting for us all along. And for one reason or another, I just didn't put two and two together, or I was, otherwise occupied. But one of the first things we're going to do for this playthrough is move up to the Stag Door and get that work done. I think I was extending the life of a percussagant. I thought it was to get some more locations, but we've currently got the Callagine running around. I seem to recall I'd made a mistake, but okay, so we don't have any more locations on the continent to worry about. Yeah, maybe it really is that we just want to move out and get rid of the remaining locations. I feel like I'm missing a detail somewhere, but in any case, we'll make our trip to Grunwald's. It may even be that I just made a mistake in terms of what I wanted to do. We have a book that we need to read, and then I should probably figure out. Are we? I think I might already have my next form. Or could be on its way. Okay, so work at the Odysseus Club, Rare Pursuits. Tonight I am garbed in soft russet and masked with a fox mask. A tail hangs behind me. My hunters will need something to snatch at. Tonight I will dance alone, and not alone. When I peek out from behind the curtains, many audience members are leaving. Others sit patiently while attendants in red and black bind them to their seats. Okay. Moving on, let's translate and read. Against the sisterhood of the knot and the foulness of their depraved customs, Hieronymus Pseudo-Hypnertomachus wrote this furious screed about the sinister influence of the sisterhood on his own church of the unconquered sun. So I'll translate that. We've got a season of despair coming up, so I want to make sure that I don't generate any dread, or if I do generate dread, that I have a contentment sitting by to deal with that. We're going through the white door. That'll be 12, let's say 13 seconds before we can check out the Stag Door. Don't really want to talk to the percussagant about anything, so I think we're more or less secure in the next few steps. And at some point I am going to want to turn in these commissions. I think the original reason for not doing that was to try and deal with notoriety. We will generate notoriety from our later expeditions, but at this point there's really no reason not to be turning in that material. Hireling. I found someone whom I might pay to enact regrettable necessities. We won't hire them though, so Alright, well, if I want to do a summoning, I have the option here. Last night, in the great pavilion above the grey sprawl of the Bounds, a woman, who once called herself Teresa Gallagher, sat on gilt-fringed cushions and offered me a horn cup of dream wine. The wine is imaginary, she explained, but the cup is not. To navigate the Mantis, one must understand the distinction. Perhaps one day you'll join me on the pilgrimage, or I'll join you. So here, let us share a secret. And her breath tickled my ear. So I think we need to go to the Gaiety immediately after the performance at the Ecdysis Club, so I suspect we won't be able to do any summonings based off of that, but it's nice to keep that as a possibility just in case. I should maybe take a look and see if the Percussagant or the Callagine need resummoning. I don't think they do, but it's maybe not a bad idea to check when they become available. Okay, let's go through the Stag Door. Gearby's riddle. In my dream, I will stand again before the Stag Door, a ridged barrier of blood-streaked horn broken long ago, not yet quite healed. That vast and golden head, Gearby, will await the answer to my riddle. Desirable answer. Here are those words. I'm trying to remember offhand. I don't, clearly I don't recall the, all the Stag Door riddles, but I'm trying to think if there are any that outright say the answer to the riddle, because the ones that I'm thinking of right now, often the lore, it mentions that the lore contains it. So, for instance, these are the words that make sacrifice sweet, but we don't know specifically the words. I'm assuming Fnord is at some point going to emerge in this discussion, but again, and I don't have immediate recall of most of the text. I mean, part of the enjoyment of the game is running into them again, so that I can experience them. But I'm pretty sure for most, if not all, of the riddles, you never actually get the answer so much as there is a hint as to what parts of your knowledge contain the answer to the riddle, which I think is kind of neat. As the music slides into a sly quick-step rhythm, I leap from the stage and prowl about between the seats. The audience members cry out, snatching at me as I pass, rocking their chairs to reach me. One crashes to the ground as my tail trophy whisks between his fingers, but another seizes it, yanks it free. The attendants bear him backstage so he may receive what he deserves. I slip out of the room to wild applause. Only the prize winner sees my other self leave, masked and russet as I, splendid tail intact. I'd forgotten the description of this one. This is definitely one of my favorites. Okay, more Mystique, so if I was worried about generating that from turning in commissions. And here we are, Instar Russet. In the high places where the air is temptation, we will seek the fourth change. Some part of you can roam in fox shape. Set it to accompany your followers to a place where it can perform the dance you must dance. If you have problems finding this place, talk to Sulachana about secret histories. Okay, so we're going to go back to the Gaiety. We've got 58.4 seconds, so that's really the only option we have right now. The stage awaits, hot and clean and bare and bright. If I move the moves and step the steps and do what is required, they'll pay me. And the light, the dark. Moth finds light in the dark, and so do I. So I think that's a glimmering. Nothing. My words cease like sand in a glass. So, it is actually not a bad idea for me to bring the Percussagant back. That's going to delay my expeditions, but I think there can be some nice side effects here. Okay, I prepared the text for study. Hieronymus claims that the powers served by the Sisterhood of the Knot made an arrangement. The Thunderskin loved the Yew, and the Grail destroyed him. As restitution for the destruction of the Axe's loved ones, Hieronymus's writing becomes incoherent with rage at this point. There's going to be a small gap in terms of finishing the talk with the Percussagant and moving and using the work slot, but I'll manage. Entering the Stag Door. The Stag Door is the Adept's Gate. To pass it is to be initiated into the first true mystery of the House of the Sun. The head Gearby weeps to see me enter where it cannot, but it must let me pass. The scarred valves of the door grind open. Could I be if I could be not this? Alright. So we're just letting explorers sort of sit idle for a bit. I don't really have anything I need from the Forgotten Chronicles, and I haven't been studying any of the secret histories, simply because I have other things that I'd like to get done more. Let's throw another health in it. I'm a listen package of flesh and blood. Tonight they'll notice that. And here we go. So if I want another Forgotten Chronicle, it's right there. Painted River has the Risk of Fascination, and then the Ascent of the Knives is usually pretty good because of the influence that it can get me, but I don't believe it will ever give me secret histories. So there's always the risk, but we will try the Painted River. I dreamt of the mansis behind the white door, of the great space above the orchard, the space that overlooks the bounds, the space where the vagabond once painted her river. Painted ships passed upon the painted river. I met the painted eyes of a painted captain. She saluted, and the motion was like the layered movement of clouds. The sail of the ship was amber, and the captain's eyes the green of new barley, and the river aquamarine. Now that I'm awake, I see those colors still. So I'm going to take the fascination. I don't think I'm going to deal with that right away. It could be that a Season of Visions comes up in about 8 seconds, but I will still have enough advance warning to be able to deal with it. Now I'll confess, I'm a little weirded out why the... I don't remember actually throwing reason into that. I suppose I must have, or maybe I didn't. I'll have to check it. But anyways, so I think in this case I do actually want to try going through the Stag Door. And in this case I don't actually see too much of a drawback to it. The one real worry is that I have Fascination, which may wind up hurting me. But, and you know, again, I've got that 8-second window. I've got a fleeting reminiscence. Oh, actually, you know what? At 7.5, I think I'm just gonna... no, I think we can still make that work. Yeah, it's gonna be a tight window for this, and we'll actually have a fleeting reminiscence from the Season of Despair anyway. It's mostly just a question of marking the problem and making sure I have a way of dealing with it, rather than just playing defensively the entire time. So, in my dreams I know the path to the Stag Door, through the bays of the bounds. Gearby will let me pass, but the path is always a puzzle. I will need reason. I felt all their eyes upon me. Afterwards I received a gift from an admirer, too gaudy for my tastes, but I can sell it on the second-hand market. Alright, so we've got a couple of health here. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm actually going to sit and wait for the... I'm going to sit and wait as far as the knock is concerned, because in 8.7 seconds I'll have a chance to resummon the Percussicant. And then from there, I'll be a little bit better equipped for the expedition. I can go on the expedition right now, but in this case here, I have a rare chance for a resummoning. In fact, if I wanted, I could actually use the Fascination. That Fascination might be better, actually, because that's a good way to get rid of it. Looks like it's a Season of Suspicion coming up. But either way, I'll have a chance to work with the Percussicant, or to extend the Percussicant. Hieronymus recovers his composure eventually to describe how the Thunderskin entered the Mansis through the Peacock Door. This, Hieronymus insists, is abomination upon abomination, but then the most abominable of doors has always been an abomination. And here we have a Forbidden Epic. So this is Land Beyond the Forest, which is the current, basically the current location that we're looking to explore. I'm always a little reluctant to give up some of my higher level lore, but this is one of those exceptions. Okay, so if Callagine will last 160 seconds. The Percussicant is currently set for 87. So the original plan was going to be to use the Subtle Flaw, but I can actually do one better. So I'll take my Sunset Rite. We'll add the Percussicant. Now the Percussicant basically is going to give everything that I need except knock. So technically adding the Fascination doesn't really give me anything, but of course, I can use, or actually, sorry, the pawn is not yet knock. Basically, anybody with knock aspect can work. So in this case, we'll add, invocation. I need to remember which rituals I'm using. So even a Locksmith's Secret here allows us to summon the creature with the Thunderskin. So this is a really, efficient little way for me to get rid of the fascination while still retaining the percussivant. Now, this means the subtle flaw is just going to decay on its own, but that's fine. The subtle flaw was just, a nice to have. So in principle, if I ever want to resummon a percussivant, I can even take this glimmering or something like that. But generally, most of the other influence has some other purpose, and so I don't normally use it for that reason. Okay, so we're fine as far as lore is concerned. We used to have a couple of gaps, and we definitely had a couple that were maybe a bit lower in terms of the overall level. We have 3 books to go. We'll have potentially 2 locations to explore before too long. But in this case, we will start with the Iron Book. So, a manual of the Order Lemaya, an order of quasi-immortals who maintained a secret enclave at the source of the river Lemaya in the Roman province of Hispania Gallicaea. And that's in Fucine. Lock the study door, the work begins. Alright, so we're going to talk with the Caligae, not really for any reason other than to preserve it. It would be nice to have a heart follower sort of pick up the mystique, but we're not doing anything that generates notoriety, and we know that we have the Season of Suspicion coming up. So in this case, what's going to happen is the weary detective will pick up the mystique. They're not going to find anything else, and so we simply move on. I may, one thing I might consider a negative is that I'm not turning in commissions. But, I mean, I haven't been turning in commissions anyway, right? We've been using the talk verb to preserve my summons. So it's kind of hard for me to turn around and say, oh dear, the investigation's keeping me from doing this thing, which is oh so important. Clearly, I've been willing to set that aside for other tasks. Okay, so I don't really need the Trembling Heat. We'll try the Painted River again, and we've got the Forbidden. Stag Door opens. There is a great chamber in the mansis through which a painted river flows. The vagabond, it is claimed, painted it from memory in the years before she left the house. Certainly, there are histories concealed in its design. I traced them with my hand last night. There were fragments of aquamarine paint beneath my nails, flecks of gold leaf when I was done. So, if you're not already familiar, you'll get very familiar with the Painted River text. It's almost certainly the location I visit the most in most of my Cultist Simulator playthroughs. And there's just a very practical reason for that. The Stag Door is the Adept's Gate. To pass it is to be initiated into the first true mystery of the House of the Sun. The head Gearby weeps to see me enter where it cannot, but it must let me pass. The scarred valves of the door grind open. And Season of Vision's coming up, so there is a small danger from the door, the Stag Door, but one I'm willing to take. So the threat, the main reason for the Stag Door is that out of the things that I can potentially lose, so here I'm going to have to sacrifice the percussivant. I don't see any reason in messing around with a rebellious one. This place merits closer investigation. Livewood Citadel. The stories that have been forbidden are the ones most apt for us to read. William Gore. So yeah, the main reason why the Stag Door winds up being a location I visit so much. Number one, it's relatively straightforward to get to. But when you think about the higher level ones, it's also kind of one of the last doors where you don't have to make some kind of sacrifice, even if it winds up being a token one. So in the case of the Spider's Door, I mean, again, you have ways of feeding it, but there can certainly be, like, it's one of the ones that in terms of it, you need to take a much bigger action than you have previously. And then even when it comes to the Peacock's Door, there is an instrument that you need to use in that case, and either repairing the instrument or obtaining the other one that you can use. These wind up being much more time-consuming, much more costly than something like the Stag Door. I also just think in general, people tend to do the nice thing. So if you're playing a 4X game, even if it's a historical one, I think players as a whole are less likely to pick something like slavery, because like, you know, these things are fantasies, but you still feel bad about it, right? And so even if you're playing Cultist Simulator, which is not exactly a game about being the most upright citizen, I think the idea of sacrificing the innocent for a door is, again, one of these things that, you know, people are probably less willing to do, and so may prefer to take other actions. One way or the other, I think that's definitely a reflection of the way that I play, even if it's maybe not a specific conscious choice. Although a lot of the times I tend to make the conscious choice not to sacrifice things to the spider's door. So yeah, you know, it's with that in mind, like, I do tend to notice that the Stag Door is the one that I go to the most, probably for those major reasons. And then, of course, the Painted River, I think, is the only spot where you can get the more advanced secret histories from. And so with that in mind, I tend to hear the Painted River text quite a bit more. Okay, so we've translated the Iron Book. A manual of the Order Lemaya, an order of quasi-immortals who maintained a secret enclave at the source of the river Lemaya in the Roman province of Hispania Gallicaea. This manual was compiled by one Melerai Yivni, who claims to have traveled to join the Ordo from the crossroads of the waters. Members of the Ordo took an oath, the Iron Chain, that required them to remain hidden from the world. This manual includes presumably long obsolete addresses and passphrases that could have been used to find the Ordo's contact in the town of Iria. So normally if I were to, like, so there is always the difference between, for me at least, between playing Cultist Simulator on my own and playing it on a broadcast, but this would be one of these cases where I don't know off the top of my head where Iria is. And so this would have been a case where I take a minute and look it up. I don't necessarily do that all the time that I play the game. Sometimes you just want to get absorbed inside of it. But I think one of the things that is very fun about Cultist Simulator is that you do have a few different layers. I guess you have a few different layers in terms of engagement. So if you really want to go in deep, you can dig in. And again, I think some of this is going to probably, how do I think of the way to put this? Like, if you, like, so sometimes you just want to get sucked into the world, and you kind of float along, and you don't necessarily want to go and look at all the real world influences. And that's fine. That's I think the way we play the majority of our games. But I think it's also very fair to say that a very strong appeal of this game comes from being able to engage a bit more deeply with its, with the world that it's created, and to look in some of the secrets. And of course, because you have concepts like the secret histories, that in and of itself can be really interesting, because in one sense, you've got this other reading of real world events. And so, to a certain extent, I feel like there would be a reasonable overlap between the two audiences, but there's Electronic Arts has a rather good MMO called The Secret World, and I think it's free to play now. But one of the things that was really interesting about that one was that in addition to the standard MMO features, there would in fact be some quests where you would look up real world information, or you kind of needed to rely on knowledge that you would not necessarily have within the game. So I seem to recall there was a level where I needed to solve a puzzle based on some sheet music. And, I think like a lot of people, well, at least a lot of people, I guess within a certain social class, like, I was not one of those people who had parents who like ensured that they did all the hobbies. I know there's a stereotype of a certain kind of parent who makes sure that the kid has like all the hobbies. But one thing that they did do was they wanted to make sure that I had some kind of education in music. And so in addition to what I did in terms of school, there was also, I did piano lessons on top of, I played in a brass band, I played in a jazz band in school. It's actually something I kind of wish that I'd stuck with, but moving definitely makes it hard to, have access to the instruments that I knew. In any case, I think that's, it's something that not a lot of games necessarily do. And in the case of the Secret World, you have, something of a conspiracy kind of like underlying. So factions inside of it are the Illuminati and the Templars. And so what you have are basically real world events and just an alternative interpretation in terms of something that's happened. And then you can think of ARG style games like what Alison Smith does in terms of Night Team 4 and the Black Watchman, where again you have a lot of real world information that you're pulling up, but in this case you are getting an alternative, kind of the story behind the headlines. Where I think the Secret Histories becomes very interesting is that you have an element of that, but what's also true is you have certain knowledge that there are histories that did not play out the way that we that we know, right? You have Alexander sort of turning away as a fairly, I feel like that's a fairly major event that's referenced multiple times inside of the game. So on top of being able to get sort of these new interpretations of things that we might be familiar with already, you have this added layer of being able to sort of figure out all these different things that happened across different histories. And of course, even commentators discussing as to which is the correct one. So with all of that is just a very long way of saying that this is one of these cases where, in addition to being able to get a little bit more out of knowledge that you may have on your own, but it's something where you also might be able to sort of tease out and, suddenly find out that there's a whole new branch, on top of the things that you already know, that there's this new branch in terms of histories that you can kind of go down and see what the game has to say about them. And again, it's not necessarily something that every player is going to engage with. I think that's one of the reasons why Weather Factory does things like the Enigmas, because that definitely seems to be another thing that has a very high level of commitment, or the real life events like the Locksmith Stream, or the RPG. In the case of The Lady Afterwards, they're going to be different. They're going to be different experiences, and they're going to be different levels of engagement. In fact, one bit of feedback I heard from somebody was, I think they mentioned that they were hoping for some more lore inside of The Lady Afterwards. I've not seen it myself, so I can't comment. But obviously, different expectations and different levels of enjoyment and engagement with the world. So I know it's a little silly for me to talk about here, but this is an example in terms of the difference between how I might play in the normal, in a normal session like this, and how I would maybe play on my own. And, for my own background, I do have an interest in classics, enough to know that there's a couple of good online sources for a lot of texts, so such as the Perseus Library. And I think the Perseus Library has, I think it's something like the Princeton Companion to archaeological site. I can't remember the exact title for it, but that was where, when there was a reference to the Meruvai, that happened to be just that nice little overlap with things that I didn't necessarily know, but had sort of the connection to, and that was sort of where I was able to sort of pick up a real world reference to, to be able to just sort of follow an interesting little thread. And I mean, again, here, I'm assuming that Iria probably wouldn't be that difficult for me to find, because of course, nope, I guess it would have been inside here. But, it talks about Hispania Gallicaea, so you already have some indication in terms of what, you're probably not going to see this show up in Korea, right, is basically what I'm saying. So even then, like, you can probably dig down a little bit and see, find out a bit more without necessarily having to go into, formal scholarship. In any case, I need to go to the Gaiety before I lose my job. So the stage awaits, hot and clean and bare and bright. If I move the moves and step the steps and do what is required, they'll pay me. And I did just get an alarm about being done. So let's go through the Stag Door again, and maybe we'll think about wrapping up. Okay, so Subtle Rupture under... Well, I guess it's kind of useful to me in the sense that I do want to do another summoning. I'm still going to try the Painted River again, though. Okay. The painted river runs from the great chamber, the painted river runs from a great chamber near the white door, far through the mansus to its far edge, where it enters the painted delta of far cloud. I voyaged half its length last night, with a stern-faced captain beneath a rust-red sail. As the clouds rose before us, the sailors raised a yearning shanty and close-hauled the sails to best use the painted wind. And all the while the captain and I discoursed on the secrets of the House of the Sun. So I'll use one of these, either the Fleeting Reminiscence or the Trembling Airs, or the Glimmering's probably the one that's going to expire right away. But we'll use one of those for the attempt to resummon the percussigan. But for the time being, we're just going to preserve them for 15 seconds as we carry on. So I think I'll wrap it up there. A little bit of a sleepier session this time around, but we're through the Stag Door, which is going to mean a bit of an acceleration in terms of our expeditions. And clearly we're already ahead one more location. Actually, I guess two more locations once our exploration's finished. So we should be able to make a bit more progress in terms of our expeditions in the following episodes. So I will thank you all for watching, and I did mention a little bit of housekeeping at the end, and it's one of these things where I know for a lot of the videos I've usually ended with the traditional YouTube habit of sort of asking, like, subscribe, comment, etc. And that did come from someone I know who has been very successful on YouTube. It is essentially their job, and it has been their job for a few years now. And they were quite... they sort of had some comments about things that were working for the channel, but one of the things that they stressed a lot was that habit. And I think, based on some of the anecdotal analytical evidence, it does seem to be something that works. But I'll admit, I do, and I think it comes across in the way that I say it, I feel very awkward doing that, and it feels a bit obnoxious to constantly ask for that over and over and over again. And I think the other thing is that at least the time of watching these videos, like, I haven't even put something like a channel image on. I know people used to mention that a whole lot, but, so I'm going to try and stop doing that for a bit. I don't want to make it some sort of formal contract saying that I'm never going to do that, but I think to a certain extent, sometimes people just want to watch something and not have somebody badger them for an action or, to ask for more. I think you already see advertising on on YouTube. So I did want to take a minute though and say thank you to all of you who have done that. And one of the big reasons I'm making the change is that the intention of these playlists has always been that if somebody's, stepped away from the channel for a bit, or they just want to have something to put on in the background, it would be nice to have that going. And I've been thinking about it for a while, that having somebody badger you about your about following and subscribing and all of that every half hour, that's got to get annoying. So to a certain extent I apologize. I have a different set of thinking about the role of that kind of call to action than I did when I started. And I realize that that's going to be sort of enshrined in a few videos for a while. But I'm going to try something. I'm going to, just try and chill out for a bit and just enjoy sharing this game with all of you. But with that in mind, of course, if you do want to speak up, if you do want to engage with the videos, I will still appreciate all of that. And every once in a while, what I may do is I might ask a question if I'm genuinely curious about people inside of the, people's reactions to the games, and that, I may ask a question because it is nice to do the interaction and such. But that was the only thing that I wanted to cover there. So hopefully the endings of these videos will not be like this, but instead moving forward, they'll be about the game. Again, I may have a couple of questions every once in a while that I ask in terms of people's preferences. I mean, a great example to ask people just to get a measure of them is to ask what their favorite aspect is. I think it's pretty clear I am a very, very lantern-loving fellow. Nock's pretty cool too. But I actually got some interesting answers from people much more knowledgeable about the game than me. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Again, I thank all of you for watching, and it's never something I want to take for granted. But I also wanted to apologize if the calls to action were something that maybe had been turning you off the videos for a while. I'm doing my best, and in this case, I think that's a change that I'm a little bit happier to put in. I will not have a video out on Tuesday, but we will see you again on Wednesday. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you in the next one.